So Scott Robertson will be announcing his side on Thursday for the upcoming Wallabies test, and there is a lot of speculation at the moment about whether or not it will be an experimental side taken to Perth, or whether it will be similar to what we have seen throughout the rest of the Rugby Championship. And in this video, I'm going to have the impossible task of trying to predict what Razor will be selecting for this matchup. Now, we haven't had a huge amount of clues, as it is still early on in the week, but there will be a few changes, mainly due to injuries. We have to wait and see how close we can get for this match. But jumping straight into the front row, this is where I do believe we will see a couple changes for Scott Robertson's side. Number 1, Tamaiti Williams. Number 2, Cody Taylor. And number 3, Fletcher Null. Ethan Negru, he ended up with the concussion from that first match up against the Wallabies, so he is unavailable for selection, so that straight away makes a change. And I do think at the moment for the All Blacks, Razor does seem to have a plan of keeping certain props together. Seems like De Groot and Lomax are one combo, Williams and Null are another, and then you've also got that backup of Ollie Norris and Basilio Tossi, who also seem to be paired together quite a bit. So who knows, maybe off the bench, Ollie Norris and Fletcher Null, if they did want to persist with Lomax starting in this game. But I think the easiest switch is just go 2 Crusaders prop, have Cody Taylor in the middle as the hooker, or perhaps even Samisoni Taukei'aho could end up starting and this matchup. But moving on to the locking duo, this is actually where I think we may see the same duo. Now, that is dependent on what is happening with Tupavai's knee, but if it is 100%, I think we will see Fabian Holland number 4 and Tupavai slotting in as the 5. Tui Pelotu added quite a bit off the bench later on in the game for New Zealand, and of course you want to start a match well, but it's also crucial that up against a side like Australia, who have been known for scoring tries later on in their games up until last round, they had 57 points scored throughout the last 20 minutes of their 4 prior matches. So you need a veteran to be able to close out a game, and Patrick Tuipulotu offers you just that. Having Taukei'aho off the bench as well, I think is working very nicely for the ABs here. So that is why I think we might see that young duo once again, Fabian Holland as well as Tupavai. But the All Blacks line out also very successful throughout the Eden Park test. I believe it was 15 from 15, so if it isn't broken, there's no point trying to shuffle it here for this upcoming test. But moving on to the loose forward trio, this is actually where I think we will see Scott Robertson select the same 3 as we saw at Eden Park. Simon Parker number 6, Ardie Savia number 7, and then Wallace Atiti slotting in as the number 8. Ardie Savia doing what he does, getting that crucial turnover midway through the game up against the Australians. Parker and Satiti, they are still building into those roles, and this honestly could be the loose forward trio we see moving forward for New Zealand. I don't see a massive amount of pressure on either of those jerseys, other than you could argue Tupavai back to 6 rather than Parker, but I don't see them doing it here. Instead, I think they'll go once again stock standard. Plus, from Razor's record, we don't normally see drastic changes. Even if the All Blacks win, and even in this type of contest, he normally likes to play it a little bit safer. But I am considering also doing a video of what would happen if Razor did fully rotate, and it would look like a very different side. So if you do want to see that, be sure to let me know. But moving on to the backline, number 9, Cam Roigard, number 10, Damian McKenzie. They may look to leave McKenzie as that number 22 or 23 role off of the bench, but at the same time, because of the lack of minutes from Ruben Love, I just don't know if they'd chuck him in the deep end for this match. At Optus Stadium, though, to be fair, if there was ever a time to do it, it would be right now. See how he goes as a starting 10, seeing as Beauden Barrett is out with his shoulder injury, but Roigard will definitely be that starting 9. If he is 100%, I can't see them rotating it, mainly because they'll get crucified if they were to put him off the bench rather than starting. I know how that feels after putting Geordie Barrett off the bench in my personal lineup, but Cam Roigard and McKenzie, combination we haven't seen too much of, but if Beauden Barrett is going to be out for 12 weeks, which nothing confirmed yet, of course that is the worst case scenario, you do need to know what your next 9-10 combination is. So I think it's either Roigard and McKenzie, or it could perhaps be Roigard and also Ruben Love. But moving on to the midfield, for Scott Robertson's side, I don't see them making the switch in their number 12 jersey. Geordie Barrett at number 12 and number 13, I could see them going Billy Proctor again. Now, Quinton Pye had a phenomenal game off the bench, and I do actually think if you're basing it off that performance, he probably does deserve a starting spot. But the main thing is whether or not they see him as that starting 13 option or predominantly a 12. Now, he did make his way onto the field for Caleb Clark. There was a bit of a reshuffle, and he was almost playing more of that outside centre role. So there is a chance, maybe, that they would consider him in the starting side. But I do also think that they won't drop Proctor from this game. They'll want him to try and find his confidence. But some people feeling maybe it is time for a little bit of something different. Now, of course, Leicester Fainga'anuku, when we get into the November internationals, he will then be eligible to play for New Zealand. There's been a lot of confusion about whether or not he can be selected, but from what I have heard, Razor did not get the exemption from New Zealand Rugby to be able to play Fainga'anuku. Now, he is allowed to train with the squad, which is what we've been seeing, as he is the replacement for Timothy Tavatavanawa, but I don't believe up until November we can actually see Fainga'anuku in an All Blacks kit, unless, of course, that exemption has gone through, in which case he would be able to play for this test match. And a lot of people want to see him off the bench even in this type of matchup, giving him that opportunity to either come on as a centre or out on the wing. Now, I will mention Jordie Barrett. He has had a lot of minutes throughout this Rugby Championship. The only 10 minutes that he has not played were the 10 minutes he was off the field for an HIA. I believe the only man who has played more minutes throughout this Rugby Championship may be Ardie Savea, and then actually possibly Will Jordan. I think has played a majority of games as well, but there are few with more minutes than Barrett, so I do hope if they do select him as the 12, it's not going to backfire and he can avoid injury from the heavy work rate that he's had throughout this Rugby Championship. But he is a very strong ball runner. We've seen him link up nicely actually with Quinn Tupaia in the later stages of that last contest, safe under the high ball. He will also want some better memories from Perth. 2021, he got himself red carded at this ground. 2 years prior, his brother Scott Barrett also got red carded here. So if we can have a Barrett performance without a red card at Optus Stadium, I'd say that that's a big success for the Barrett family there. But moving on to the back three. Number 11, if he is available, I do think that they will once again select Caleb Clarke, mainly to give him some more minutes, seeing as he's only had the one game for New Zealand so far. Now, the ankle injury did look concerning, but by the sounds of it, he is still training with the squad and just trying it out, see whether or not he will be all right for this weekend. Number 14, Leroy Carter. I think from that man's two performances so far for the All Blacks, certainly got a future in the black jersey. Some people have been a little bit critical of Carter, saying that his defence still needs a little bit of work, but at the end of the day, you've got a young player. He's played one season of Super Rugby since returning from the Sevens, and he's played 2 games of international rugby. So there's always going to be a little bit of a adjustment period, because no player is ever going to be at their peak in terms of gelling with their team just after 2 matches, so it will take time. And if they're willing to put time into Billy Proctor in that 13 jersey, they should definitely be investing time into Leroy Carter as a winger for this team as well. And then number 15, I can see them going with Will Jordan. Now, if Clarke is injured, we might see a bit of a reshuffle in that back three. But overall, that would mean only 3 changes across the starting side. The 2 props, and then also Damian McKenzie as that number 10. Now, like I said, I would love to see a few more players getting switched in and out for this side, definitely with the fact that this is probably the perfect game to try out players before November, but there is no denying that Australia, with a couple overseas reinforcements and the likes of Will Skelton, may be even stronger than they were for that Eden Park test match. But moving on to the bench, this is where I believe Razor will select Samisoni Taukei'aho as his number 16. I just don't see Brodie McAllister getting the chance here. Number 17, Ollie Norris. That is, of course, due to that injury of Ethan de Groot. And then number 18, I actually think they'll go Pasilio Tossi here. It's the perfect opportunity to put Norris and Tossi back together. Plus, if Lomax did pick up some sort of hand injury from the first test match, makes perfect sense to rest him here and give this other young combination, which they have tried before, the opportunity for this game. Number 19, I think they'll stick with Patrick Tuipulotu. Now, there is a chance that instead maybe he comes into the starting lineup rather than Tupovai once again, depending on injury. But I think no matter where he is across the 23, Patrick Tuipulotu going to add a lot to this All Black side. Number 20, I think once again we will see Peter Lakai. Got himself a few minutes off the bench in the last game up against Australia. Didn't get to do a huge amount, but still had a couple decent moments that I believe the coaches would have looked at and gone, yep, give him another crack here. Number 21, Cortez Ratama. Number 22, Quinn Tupaia. If he does miss out on the starting side, definitely needs to be somewhere across this All Blacks 23. And speaking of 23s, this is where I do believe they will select Ruben Love. If he misses out on the starting side, similar to Tupai, he's got to be somewhere across this 23-man team. Definitely with the absence of Beauden Barrett, he can come off the bench. He offers you the 15 and the 10 cover, and so far for the All Blacks, he's played more out on the wing. So I guess that is one bonus for him, that he does actually offer a little bit more versatility. And we've got to remember, he's good under the high ball as well, Ruben Love. So that may actually increase his chances of getting a few more minutes if they do need someone to pop out on the wing. I mean, if it ends up with him getting minutes, I think a lot of people would still accept that if he came onto the field as a winger in this game. But that is my Scott Robertson predicted side. Now, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see a few more switches along the way as well. And like I said, I've actually got another video planned where I do go much more experimental for the Scott Robertson lineup. So if you do want to see that, of course, let me know. That would involve resting certain players as well as fully rotating, giving more of the guys in the squad an opportunity here before the end of the Rugby Championship. But do let me know who you guys think Scott Robertson will be selecting. Hopefully there are a few more clues that come out in the near future, but we are only a couple days away from the announcement taking place on Thursday. We will, of course, be doing a video based around that as well. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all for the next one.